Hi, my name is Amanda Nicole. I am a Christian life coach and teacher at the Freedom Through Divorce online school. This content is created for the sole purpose of bringing awareness of the school and the kind of content that I teach to the women that desperately need it. Thank you for joining me. I pray that God will speak to you and that you will experience freedom while you listen. So I want to talk a little bit more about the motive for divorce. I talked a little bit about that the last time, the last podcast. I was telling you guys that my personal motive for divorce was just really understanding the depths of God's love and understanding, how much of a contrast and a difference there was between his love for me and what that looked like and what his plan and purpose that he had for me looked like versus what I was experiencing on a daily basis in my marriage. There was such a stark difference between the two. And the more I got to know the depth of his love, the more it was kind of like, before he started to speak to me on the subject of divorce, my picture of his love for me was fuzzy. It was blurry and it wasn't clear. And as he began to speak and I really began to understand the depth of his love for me, that picture became very clear. And as that picture became clear, it was very easy to kind of hold it up to the picture that I was seeing and say, okay, there's a huge difference between the two. And it wasn't difficult to say, okay, this isn't what he has for me. Let me try to pursue what he does have for me. And what does that look like? And for me, it looked like pursuing divorce. And so if that's you, I want to just kind of bring that to your attention because so many people, especially those who are critics of divorce and who are judgmental, they all tend to believe the same thing, which is that people who get a divorce for frivolous and, just reasons that aren't important, reasons that are very surface, very superficial. And that is just not the case. When you're in an unauthorized marriage, there are some very real, very deep issues that are untenable. And if, people knew what you were really dealing with behind closed doors, they would understand. But they don't. And you just have to, resolve yourself to knowing that, and make sure that you understand. And so I want to just bring that to your attention because, a lot of times we hear that so much that we assume that, it's not that bad. We'll tell ourselves it's not that bad. We can stick it out. It's not that bad. But when you understand God's love for you, it's not about how bad it is. It's about, is it what God has for you? Is it his plan and purpose for you? Is it his heart for you? And if it's not, then there's a disconnect. Then you need to understand what that disconnect is. It's not always divorce, but if it is, we want to make sure that we go to him and ask him about that. And we, don't automatically assume that that's just absolutely not the case. And that just absolutely is not an option because, there are so many people that I encounter that have resolved that in their mind. And by doing so, they have, forced themselves into a life of misery. They forced themselves into a unauthorized marriage that is going to bring them pain and it's going to bring their children pain and it's going to bring their spouse pain, in perpetuity. And so, that's not God's will for us. That's not his heart for us. And that's not his love for us. So we really want to understand what his love for us really looks like, because what happens is that God's love brings courage. It brings the courage to want better for yourself because, he wants better for you. When you have been in a situation where you have been abused in one way or another for an extended period of time, the will for you to want better for yourself is like low. It's very low. But when you see that God, the creator of the universe and the lover of your soul, wants more for you, then that gives you the courage to say, you know what, I want more for myself and I'm going to pursue more for myself. And that brings strength because you definitely need strength to walk through the journey of divorce. It is not for the faint of heart. It is extremely difficult. And it is definitely something that, you have to walk through. You kind of can't, you don't want to walk to it and get stuck. And so many people do that. They walk to it and get stuck. And they see how difficult it is, and they're running from it, and they're just, they get through it barely, and then they basically just get through it legally, and they don't get through it spiritually. And that's not the same. Getting through it legally is difficult enough, but you also have to get through it spiritually. You have to come out on the other side stronger and better and closer to God, and with a deeper relationship with him. And you also have to come out knowing your purpose and participating in it. That's the goal of life as Christianity, period. Whether you're going through a divorce or you're not, that's what you're supposed to be doing, is hearing God and doing what he says. We're created to worship him and to bring him glory, and knowing our purpose is the only way that we can do that. And so we have to be able to know what his purpose is. Faith, it cannot be found where the will of God is not known. And we have to know what his will is in order to have faith and in order to please him. And so it's important that we are able to get to a place where we can hear him and know what he's called us to do and do that. And if that means that you can't do that outside of your marriage, then you really have to go to God and say, all right, now what? Now what? And that's with anything in your life. You've got to go to God and say, listen, this piece of my life does not line up with scripture. It does not line up with the plan and purpose that you have for me. How do I fix it? How do I, bring this area of my life in alignment with what you have for me? Because the reality is that life is short, and living it outside of God's will is just miserable. It's absolutely miserable. Anyone who has been in an unauthorized marriage knows that firsthand. They know that it is absolutely miserable, and it is not somewhere that you want to spend the rest of your life at. You just don't want to be at that place forever. And so I wanted to talk about that it is just, you really want to that's one of the things I talk about in the authorized divorce course is, understanding the important motive for divorce. The motive has to be that I want to move towards God's will, and I can't do it in this marriage. It has to be that. There's no other reason for divorce that's going to lead you to freedom. There isn't. It has to be that. If it's any other reason, it's going to lead you to pain. It's going to lead you to bitterness. It's going to lead you to the same mindset that got you in that situation. You're going to leave the situation and then go back into another one because you have that same mindset. If your mindset is not, this is not the will of God, I cannot live another day outside of God's will. And I've already come to the conclusion that this path that I'm on is not going towards his will. If that's not your reason for getting off of that path and saying, all right, I've got to get on a new path, I've got to move towards divorce so I can move towards God. If that's not your motive for doing it, then don't do it. Don't do it until you can get to that place that says, this is not about me. This is not about my children. This is not about my ex. This is about God and his plan and purpose for me. Because at the end of the day, if you can participate in God's plan and purpose for you, then he has you in your best interest at heart. He has your children's best interest at heart. He has your ex's best interest at heart. He is trustworthy to be Lord of your life. And if he's going to be Lord of your life, then you have to be able to trust him with your life. That means trusting him with your divorce. So let's really think about, okay, what is the true motive for doing that? Because it really does, it's actually freeing, once you can kind of get to that, resolve, it removes all the guilt and condemnation. It removes all the fear. It removes all the worry. It removes all of the barriers that keep you there away, because it shifts the responsibility from you to make this right, to fix this, to make it be okay. And moves it to God. That's what what the Bible says when it says, cast your cares on him, for he cares for you. His yoke is easy and his burdens are light. You can't carry it. So you have to give it to him. You have to give it to him. And when you do, there's such a weight, there's such a relief, and it really does give you the courage to move forward and say, okay, let's move towards God's plan and purpose for me. So that's what today's podcast is all about, is your motives. This course is material that I got straight from God when I was in that same situation where I felt like my situation was just completely untenable. I had been in it for years and I felt like I needed to get out, but I needed to know, what does God say? When is divorce acceptable? Is there a time when it's acceptable? Is there a time when it's actually necessary? How do I know? How do I get that, okay in my spirit to say, all right, this is what I need to do? All of those questions I went straight to God with, and he answered every single one of them. And I've put the answers to every single one of them in this course. So if you are a Christian woman that feels like divorce is, the only option for you, and you want to hear God speak on it before you make such a drastic decision, or if you're in a situation where you've already gotten a divorce, but you never did hear God clearly, and you wonder if you made the right decision, this course is for you. I encourage you to order this course to allow God to speak truth to you and to bring freedom so that you don't feel condemned.